Okay, then welcome again. Hello, everyone. So excited that you decided to join us today. And I'm sure, like myself, many of you get confused. What should you be eating? Or more importantly, maybe what you should be staying away from. With so much information being shared about food, there is no wonder why you may find it difficult to find or to know what to eat versus what you shouldn't be eating. So today I'm very happy that we have nutritionist Tamar Alkin, who from Nutrition Excellence, who will be able to possibly provide a little bit more clearance on a lot of the myths we hear around food. But before I formally introduce Tamar, or let her introduce herself, I just want to give you a little bit of information about WorkWell NYC. Hopefully everybody here is familiar with us. But if not, I just want to share a little bit of information about our mission and why we're here. So WorkWell NYC is the city's worksite wellness program, and we're here to help you live well and work well. Our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for our employees to live healthy, active lifestyles. Health is not just the abstinence of disease. Health is physical, it's mental, financial, emotional, and we know that health exists on a spectrum. We're here for you with health and well-being resources and programs to help you move more, eat well, be well, and take action to prevent disease, no matter where you are in your health journey. We are committed to addressing matters of inequity and providing platforms to educate and develop structural solutions to health and wellness, both in and out of work. So with further ado, let me bring on Tamar. Tamar, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Brenda, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Tamar. I am a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian for a little over 5 years, and I've worked with the Department for the Aging, the Department of Health, and I do a lot of nutrition education. So this I put together as a list of topics that have come up the most frequently over my years of experience, of things that people really ask that it was just really important to me that we kind of address to make sure we understand, you know, the myth and truth behind it all. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to my DOE friends that I forced to register in fear that nobody else would show up. So I appreciate everyone's time and attendance. So with that, we will jump right into it, into our first myth. Let's see. What do you think? We'll get a poll going. So if you could take a few seconds and just jump into the poll. Eating healthy is too expensive. I know there's some people that are logged in on the phone, so I'll do my best to read them out loud. Okay, looks like we've got about 77% of our participants, which is awesome, answered. And they said that 37% thought this is true and 63% think that this is false. So I'm glad that there's a little bit of a mix in the responses so we can jump into it. So when we think about eating healthy, right? Now, it's not wrong to assume that eating healthy is generally going to be more expensive, but it doesn't always have to be. We also have to consider the alternative, because what happens when we spend the majority of our meals, fast food restaurants, takeouts? I mean, we live in New York, right? We are blessed with some of the finest restaurants, some of the best takeout, the hole in the wall places, right? We have lots of fast food at our fingertips. But if we find ourselves going to these places quite frequently, what ends up happening to us? We gain weight. Our cholesterol goes up. We develop high blood pressure. We risk diseases like type 2 diabetes, right? Chronic illnesses that when you consider the cost of them, those diseases are not free, right? they're actually quite expensive. Doctor's visits, medication, time off work, right? Ambulance ride, physical therapy, hospital stays. These are things that you have to consider into your overall health that are going to cost you way more in the long term, right, than adding some beets or cabbage to your grocery cart this week. So when we think about, ways to help us save money, the most expensive thing that generally hits our cart once we go grocery shopping are the proteins, right? Meat, chicken, things like that. So one thing to consider is alternate sources of protein: beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, tofu, which we're going to talk about in just a second, right? For example, 1 cup of lentils has 18 grams of protein, right? Versus a 3-ounce serving, right? Think like a small deck of cards of 22 grams of protein in beef. So it's quite comparable in terms of protein, and we'll also get, a nice amount of fiber from the lentils. So it doesn't mean we can't eat meat, right? I'm all for eating meat, but the idea is that if we switch it up, it's also an easy way to help us save some money and expose us to, a few more nutrients along the way. Our tinned fish, salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, herring, anchovies, right? Now, yes, right now they are going to be more expensive. Right now, everything's more expensive, right? But it also is a really nice alternative to grabbing fresh fish, which, after a day or two, you didn't get a chance to cook it, you have to throw it out. Anytime we end up throwing away food, we're really throwing away money. So if we're really concerned about budget and trying to eat healthy, tinned fish are a fantastic place to start. You get all those healthy omega-3s, great source of protein. If you get salmon, canned salmon, you also get the bones. So it's actually a fun fact. You're eating that calcium. Just like our bones have calcium, fish bones have calcium too. So a good thing to add to any sandwich, salad, and not too expensive considering how healthy they are. We have our dairy products like our yogurt, our cottage cheese, kefir, right? These are all excellent sources of calcium, of protein as well. Cottage cheese now you can find like cultured cottage cheese. So you'll also be able to get some benefits of like probiotics in there as well. And then our fruits and vegetables that are available to us all year round. Thank God we live in New York City with lots of access to farmers markets and supermarkets where we don't have to wait for the season to be in season. We have access to healthy foods that are available to us all year round. For example, we have our cabbage, carrots, onions, beets, tomatoes, collard greens, kales, lettuce, those lettuce greens, sweet potatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, garlic, spinach. All these things count as a serving of vegetables. They are available and they are not too expensive, right? And we also have our frozen produce. If you are one person and a whole head of cauliflower seems daunting and you maybe don't need so much, frozen is always a nice option that you can just take out a cup, roll it back up, and put the rest away, take out the rest whenever you need it. So there is a nice alternative to, not wasting as much as we, can't use. Things like cabbage. Let's say we go to the store, we buy a head of cabbage and it's $2. You're not eating that head of cabbage in one sitting, right? That's something that's going to last you at least a few meals. So then when you start to do the math, the cost per serving goes down, right? So if you can get, a serving of vegetables for 40, 50 cents, that's pretty good, right? Considering we know how healthy they are for us. Fruit, a little bit easier of a sell. People tend to eat more fruit than vegetables, but we have access to apples, oranges, bananas, pears, and our frozen berries all year round as well. And our legumes, right? Our beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, tofu that are always available to us. If we feel like we're spending too much money on meat and chicken, then these are always there for us. Or we could use them in addition to things like meat and chicken, right? We can use these as what we call meat extenders, where if we're making something like chili and we can only afford 1 pound of ground meat, I can add beans to my chili. I can add 2 cans of beans. I can add 3 cans of beans and a can of crushed tomatoes and peppers and onions, right? And now look how that 1 pound of ground meat has really increased in terms of volume. Some other good tips are to eat seasonal produce, right? If we go to this farmer's market right now, we find an abundance of beautiful spring produce, things like asparagus, like radishes, where if you're interested in trying something new and seasonal, now would be the time to do it, as they'll be cheaper than, finding asparagus in January. From farmers markets, Healthy Bucks, right? There are other options depending on your age that, we might have access to as like city help, right? They give out those coupons that you can use as double at the farmers markets. If you are looking for things like berries in the winter, right? They're not going to be in season, but frozen is always a nice alternative. We have the CSAs, like the community shared agricultures. We have the PSEs that are really nice. They're the policy systems and environmental change efforts of nonprofits that try to get produce into people's hands and buying in bulk when possible. Things like beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, or even our carrots and sweet potatoes and onions, these things tend to last a while. So those are good ones, stock items, staple items that are worth investing in so that you can get, a few weeks of use out of them. So this is what I was talking about, right, with the meat extenders. Same thing with soup. If you think about making soup, adding beans or lentils and vegetables to, a few pieces of chicken or meat in a soup just really helps increase the volume. It helps increase the overall nutrition of it. So, don't skip out on the vegetables. Don't skip out on the meat extenders. We know that people who tend to eat more plants tend to have less diseases overall. So they are a great addition to any animal protein. We can sub them for animal proteins here and there. So, it doesn't always have to be too expensive. It just requires a little bit of thought. I am seeing some Q&A questions come in. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to run through the slides, and then hopefully we're going to have time at the end for questions. We'll do our best to get to them. But if you do have questions, please throw them into the Q&A. On to our next question. Soy and tofu can cause breast cancer. How many of you have heard this one before? We'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Thanks so much to everyone participating in the polls. It's nice to know that there are people listening. All right, we'll give it one more second. Okay, it looks like 83% of you said that was false, and about 17% of you said that was true. So another one I'm glad that we are addressing, because we got some mixed answers in the crowd. So this happens to be an area of media hype and misinformation, I'd say. A lot of articles of research came out that, soy lowers testosterone in men. It raises estrogen in men. It can cause, feminine effects. It increases your risk for breast cancer, hormone disruption, early puberty, right? These were a lot of the headlines that came up around soy. Now, one thing to point out is the difference between dietary soy from like real foods versus soy protein isolate. Soy protein isolate is what we'll find in like mock meats, in protein powders, in these types of very heavily processed soy foods. Now, when we turn them into this soy protein isolate, it's about 65% of the protein that's in the soybeans. They take defatted, flaked soybeans. They soak them in water under alcohol to remove the sugars and the fibers, and then they get, dried and crushed into a powder, right? And that's how they get that protein. So it's very different than comparing it to fresh soy products like tofu, edamame, tempeh, or even fermented products like miso, soy sauce, natto, I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, soy milk, right? So, these are things that we want to try and also discern between, when we're reading research, what was really used, what were they measuring? So one of the biggest concerns that comes up around soy, right, are the isoflavones, which are a type of, phytoestrogen, meaning that when we eat them, they have these estrogen mimicking effects similar to estrogen that we have, but they're not the same thing. The soy isoflavones are weaker and have a slightly different effect than our own estrogen. And a lot of these research studies were done on mice. So, humans and mice metabolize things differently, right? So it is something to keep in mind. So take it with a grain of salt again. Now, the benefit of tofu, right, is that it contains calcium and magnesium, which are two really important bone strengthening minerals. So especially for women, right, as we age, we need more calcium, we need more magnesium to make sure that we have strong, healthy bones. For men too, but we want to make sure that, we're not completely eliminating this food group because it could be a good source of that. So when we think about these soy-based foods, right, they have that really high polyphenol content. The polyphenols are a subset of the antioxidants. It's the type of antioxidants. And we know that those have the anti-inflammatory properties. So when we look at that, right, we know the importance of incorporating more plant-based foods into our diet helps lower the risk of things like heart disease, helps lower cholesterol, and they even found protective effects in terms of cancers like prostate and breast. So when it comes to soy, there are a lot of anecdotes and small research studies also about it helping the effects of menopause. Those soy mimicking effects that we were talking about, those isoflavones, actually help our estrogen receptors and that they attach to them. So when that happens, when menopause hits, right, our estrogen levels decline. So that actually can help with a lot of those symptoms. In terms of cancer, the research studies that had the most promising effects were seen in Asian women. So not necessarily done here, and we don't totally know the effects in terms of a Western diet compared to an Asian diet. But for the most part, people who tend to eat more plants overall have a decreased risk of these types of cancers. So take it in, with a grain of salt. It doesn't mean we have to eliminate it completely, but it can be a great addition to our overall diet. When it comes to which types of soy, we always want to choose, and this is a good rule of thumb for anything, we want to choose as least processed as possible. So when it comes to soybeans like edamame or tofu, tempeh, soy milk, we'll get the most benefit of the soy out of those types of items that are, low calorie, high protein foods versus the mock meats, the soy protein concentrate, or the soy protein isolate. So hopefully that helps clear up a little bit about that soy myth. Jumping into our next one, we could get that poll up about fad diets. We have fad diets, low carb, keto, intuitive eating. These are what I need and helpful for long-term weight loss. Let's see, Brenda, was there a poll for that one?
There was a poll. I'm trying to get it to launch. Hold on.
Okay. Hang with us, but think about the question. In the meantime, right? Do you, if you're familiar with these diets, if you know anyone, there we go. Perfect.
There we go.
Okay. So jump into the polls. Let's see what people think. We'll give you a few seconds. Okay, so we have about 82% of people that agreed it's false, and about 18% of people think that it's true. So when we jump into it and we see the different types of diets, fad diets, which I'll, appropriately label all of those, are very restrictive. And anytime we are too restrictive, this causes binging, right? Because if you go, oh, that's it, I'm low carb, I'm going to throw out all the flour and all the sugar in my house. And then a week later, the office has a potluck and somebody brought in your favorite chocolate cake. It takes a lot of self-control not to eat that entire cake. But if we approach it with a little bit more of a mentality of, ooh, I love chocolate cake. I have not stopped thinking about this all day long. I knew someone was going to bring it. And you take a small piece, right? Then we're satisfied. We're, honoring that craving. We're not going crazy and taking too much, but we want to make sure that, we're not being overly restrictive. Low carb, right? It can be helpful if you are focusing on the right type of carbohydrates, right? So we know that there are two types of carbohydrates. We have our simple carbohydrates, which are like our candies, our cookies, our straight up sugar, junk, soda, right? And we have our complex carbohydrates, things like sweet potatoes, fruits, vegetables, right? And the difference between the two, one of the differences between the two is that there's a lot of fiber in the complex carbohydrates. So it's going to help us stay fuller longer. It's going to help stabilize our blood sugar. And those fruits and vegetables, and we know have a lot of nutritional benefit to us as opposed to the simple carbohydrates. So eating more of the complex carbohydrates hopefully will leave room for less of those simple carbohydrates. So eating low carb in that sense, right, from that food group would be a good option. The ketogenic diet, this is a fun one. The ketogenic diet was designed for children with epilepsy. And the thought being that our brain runs on carbohydrates, that is its preferred fuel method. And if we were to eliminate carbohydrates from the diet, maybe we'd see less seizures. So it works for children with epilepsy, but it is very, 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 very strict in that they have to weigh grams of carbohydrates, literally down to the gram. So it could mean an eighth of a piece of bread, right? Something very, very small, as opposed to eating, 48 ounces of like a porterhouse steak. So long term, it's not really sustainable, but you'll notice that as soon as people start doing it, they lose weight, right? Mostly because they're cutting out a lot of carbohydrates that they were eating before, but it's not a real long-term solution. Intuitive eating. Again, this also takes a very special type of person. The idea behind this, if you're not familiar, is honoring your cravings. And, if you eat what you feel like your body is telling you, that's something that comes up in pregnancy also. And people say, oh, well, the baby really wants cheesecake, right? And then you see someone devour an entire cheesecake. So if you have a really, really strong sense of control, then maybe that is something that would work for you. I personally do not, and I know a lot of people that do not. So this is not an idea that would work for a lot of people. But if it's something you're interested in, there's a lot of articles that you can look up about intuitive eating. There's a book or few that can provide a little bit more information. I find that long-term solutions for overall weight loss and health maintenance are lifestyle modifications, right? Meaning that we make small changes to things that we're already doing or incorporating one or two new things, trying to see how that can fit into our overall lifestyle as opposed to, completely eliminating something. Physical activity, nobody wants to hear it, nobody likes to hear it, but it really is the solution to a lot of our ailments. And if you are interested in a more diet-based plan, the Mediterranean diet, the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet, that is very heavily plant-focused. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, things like that, with room for a little bit of meat, a little bit of chicken, a little bit of eggs, a little bit of cheese, even a little bit of sweets. But again, that part is all in moderation. Okay, one of the benefits also, right, in the Mediterranean MIND diets and those lifestyle modifications is incorporating healthy fats, right? Things like nuts, seeds, olives, avocados. People tend to be afraid of fats, but especially these types of fats that we can, easily fit into anything we're eating are going to help us create a much more filling and satisfying dish. So don't fear the fat. We just want to make sure it's the right kind of fat. And jumping into our next one, hopefully we get the poll. Oh, there we go. Diet soda is better than regular soda. This one I'd say is probably one of the most common ones I get. So we'll give you a few minutes. Okay, so it looks like most of you are on board. 92% of you said this is false, And about 8% of you said this was true. So I'm glad that the majority of people are up to date about these diet sodas. So what happens is when we are about to start eating or drinking something, you know that feeling, you smell something, your mouth starts salivating, your stomach starts grumbling, like we know we're about to get our hands on something. And then we go ahead and drink, a 32-ounce Diet Coke or any of the diet sodas. I don't mean to pick on one brand. Our cells are waiting for that energy. But if we can't break down the artificial sweeteners, then that means that energy isn't able to get into our cells. But we already put everything in motion, right? Our salivating, our stomach grumbling, our pancreatic juices going, but our cells are still sending out those hunger, hello, I was waiting for something that never came. So it actually ends up having like that opposite effect, that people who drink a lot of these artificial sweetened beverages end up eating a lot more to compensate for those, energy starved cells. So, that lack of appetite suppression may lead to that overconsumption. And as humans, when it comes to picking foods, when we're looking for something fast, like a quick fix, not many of us are going to be like, oh, let me make a nice slice of avocado toast with a poached egg and some radishes on top. Most of us are going to run for a donut or a muffin, something high calorie, high fat, and quickly satisfying. So, it is a slippery slope. This was an interesting study done on women and people with obesity, right? That they measured drinks with sucralose, which is Splenda, right? And they found that those people, especially the women with obesity, had greater brain reward activity after drinking it, right? It starts, exciting your brain. But they also measured the reduction in the hormone that inhibits appetite, meaning that cue never got there, that, hey, you know what, I'm starting to fill up, I feel okay. It was never suppressed. So they still get those hunger cues, right? And they measured them at a buffet, and they found that those who drank the drinks with sucralose, with the Splenda, ended up eating a lot more food at the buffet. Then they took MRI images of the brain, right? This was a study with 74 participants. And they, if you watch enough TV like I do, those pictures that light up different parts of your brain. And they saw the parts that were linked to appetites and cravings. And then they took blood samples to measure blood sugar and our metabolic hormones that are responsible for us feeling hungry and full. And they found, again, that at the buffet table, those that drank the artificial sweetened beverages ended up consuming a lot more, right? So it was actually linked to increased weight gain. So especially with people that might be overweight or, borderline obese, these are things that they'd want to avoid, right? Because it's going to end up increasing your craving for high calorie foods. Now, in terms of metabolizing these, when we drink all these beverages and we're not able to break them down, where do they go, right? And we know that our digestion, with our stomach and our gut bacteria, we have millions and millions of bacteria that their jobs are to break down our food. And if they're not able to break down these artificial sweeteners, what happens to them, right? Do you think that our bacteria likes them? Do you think that they, can figure out what to do with them? So we see that it actually alters our gut microbiome and it disrupts our bacteria. And when this happens, things like glucose intolerance, reduced insulin sensitivity, right? These are things that are linked to diabetes, altering blood sugar regulation, and all of these are disrupting our weight regulation systems. So this could actually contribute to weight gain. It can increase our risk for things like diabetes based on the food choices that we're making and our insulin resistance. And we'll often see increases in reports of depression, inflammation, and overall GI discomfort because we're unable to break them down. So things like bloating, gas, and diarrhea are very common. So what are these artificial sweeteners, right? Just a little bit of a definition here. They provide sweetness and they are calorie-free with no impact on our blood sugar levels. These are man-made, they are synthetic, they come from a lab, and they are made and designed to produce a sweetness much more than our regular table sugar, right? Which we know is sucrose. So sucralose, that's Splenda, that's the yellow packet. This was the most widely used due to its closest resemblance to sugar, and to note that it is 400 to 700 times sweeter than sugar. So the idea here being that you would need a lot less of it than if you were to use table sugar. So, just a little bit of a definition. And again, when it comes to weight loss, we find that people that tended to load up on these types of artificial sweeteners ended up gaining a lot of weight. New to the market, we have our stevia products, right? Are you guys familiar with this? Stevia, truvia, these come from the stevia plant, okay, a perennial shrub. So these were touted as a better alternative since they are naturally derived, right? And they aren't implicated with any of these controversial health claims that, we saw in the Post wrote an article about, some like xylitol and those sugar alcohols the other day. So when we look at things like stevia and truvia, right? Oh, but they're plant-based. They must be much healthier for us. So again, it's 0 calories per gram, little or no effect on our blood sugar, and it is 100 to 300 times sweeter than sugar. But if I go to the supermarket and I open my stevia packet, are little leaves falling out of my stevia? No, right? It's powdered and it looks like sugar. So you have to think about the process that it goes through, to get there from the stevia plant. So if you know anything about the stevia plant, it's actually quite bitter, right? It has a bitter aftertaste. So in general, other artificial sweeteners, flavors, or chemicals are added to these stevia extract products, right? Because stevia alone is quite bitter. So you have to think about it, right? It does have to go through this big processing ordeal in order to get into that powder or the droplets or however you take your stevia. So keep that in mind. These non-nutritive sweeteners, right? These artificial sweeteners, sucralose, the equal, sweet and low, all the stevia products, if we're unable to digest them, what happens to them, right? Where do they go? So these things tend to stack up in our body and they float around and they can cause inflammation, which triggers an immune response. And you'll see things or episodes like eczema and psoriasis. All these inflammatory diseases start to increase with the more of these non-nutritive sweeteners that we are consuming. So one of the questions I get often, what can we eat? So natural sweeteners, right? A little bit of a healthier alternative. We have honey. We want to look for raw, unpasteurized, unfiltered honey. It should be thick. It should be in a jar. If your bodega honey bear costs $2, right? That's a little suspicious. So we want to make sure that we are buying real, authentic honey. Maple syrup, real, again, authentic maple syrup, not, the table pancake syrup, not that one, real maple syrup. And of the two, the honey and the maple syrup are going to be expensive. But again, it's something that should last a while, right? How much of this added sugar are we really consuming? Something we know, we don't want to be eating too much of. Some new ones to hit the market, we'll find date syrup. It's used very often in Middle Eastern cooking. Dark like molasses, but has a very nice sweetness to it, and coconut sugar. Okay, who's ready for our last one? Supplements. The question is, I cannot get all of my nutrients from food, meaning that I have to resign to taking supplements. Okay, we have a little bit of a divided crowd on this. I like to see this. Awesome. So about 68% of you think that it's false, and about 32% of you think that it's true. So when it comes to supplements, one very important thing to remember is that unfortunately in our country, the supplements are not regulated by the FDA. So we don't often know 100% of their composition, meaning that they can write things like proprietary blend Or it could be if you're taking, a calcium supplement, it could be 1,000, it could be 5, it could be 50. We never really know how much or how little you're getting, right? And that can often be dangerous. So just remember that. Now, when it comes to getting supplements, when it comes to getting nutrients from supplements versus foods, right? For example, if I'm eating a cup of beans, I know that when I eat beans, I'm getting fiber and protein and potassium and calcium, right? This whole umbrella effect of nutrients. But if I'm taking supplements, I'm only getting a very, very isolated nutrient, right? One, or if it's a multivitamin, a few of one, but a very, very isolated effect that we're missing out on that whole synergistic effect that we could get from eating real food. So my philosophy is to always try to eat real foods first. That's what, I always try to promote. Now, doesn't mean that there aren't people who would benefit from supplements. Women who are pregnant or planning on becoming pregnant, vegans need to supplement with things like B12, right? That's a vitamin that we only find in animal products or, nutritional yeast, but that is something that we would have to pay attention to. People on certain medications. Different medications interact differently with different parts of our body and, can prohibit things like absorption of certain vitamins and minerals. Patients of bariatric surgery. If you have undergone bariatric surgery, you are metabolizing things differently for the rest of your life. So you will be on these certain supplements for the rest of your life, and it is very important that you take them. Advanced age, dietary restrictions, as we age, we're not always eating the most that we used to. We're not always, having the same access to foods. So if we find ourselves in a deficient state, we could always supplement. And again, people with loss of appetite for a lot of different reasons, then they might benefit from supplements as well. So if you are overall healthy and feel like you can get everything from a well-balanced diet, I would definitely try that first. If you find yourself on this list, then it is definitely worth considering supplements. We just want to make sure that we get tested first, get our blood tested, speak to a doctor so that we can find out which supplements we should be taking and how to take them and when to take them. So these are my references that we will send out. And now I think I have, a few minutes to address a few questions. Brenda, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I was able to go through and pull a couple. So would you like me to just ask you a few questions regarding the information that you covered in today's webinar?
Yeah, I'm seeing a few here. So one of them comes up about monk fruit, which is actually really interesting. The EU has not approved monk fruit as an artificial sweetener because they don't have enough research about it. So while it's approved here, I'm always, curious to know why it wasn't approved there. So take that with a grain of salt. I would say, definitely do your own research. And again, when it comes to monk fruit, it's very similar to things like the stevia. Yes, it's from a plant, right? But it's not like you're opening that package and a piece of monk fruit rolls right out, right? When it comes to soybean oil or lectins, right? I think that's the question that people ask about the lectins, these anti-nutrients that are found in some legumes. Things we can do to help prevent that with the lectins are soaking them, cooking them, or fermenting them. Doing that to lectin-rich foods with these anti-nutrients actually helps break down the lectins, which make it easier for us to digest and absorb and do not inhibit absorption of the other minerals. Soybean oil is an oil that comes from the soybean seeds that actually can be quite inflammatory. Again, it must go through a lot of steps in order to reach the oil that's on your shelves. It goes, just to give you a quick background, the seeds have to be crushed and heated to very high temperatures. And if you know anything about cooking or roasting seeds at very high temperatures, they tend to burn. Then they use this, it's a 3-step process, RBD, it's a refining, bleaching, and deodorizing that they, put a solvent in to extract the seeds from the oil. And then it's going to go through a bleaching process so that you can't see that it's unfortunately burnt, right? Which is why if you go to the store, all the soybean oils are the exact same color. But if you open 10 different bottles of, real olive oil, there'll be 10 different colors. And the last step is deodorizing, right? Where they'll add agents to remove the smell and the taste so that you can't smell or taste that it's burnt. So these are what we would consider processed soy products, right? So when it comes to soy, I would really try to stick to the least, the most minimally processed foods like the tofu, edamame, soy milk, things like that. Can I have an example of complex carbohydrates? Yes, that is where we want to focus on fiber, right? So complex carbohydrates are our beans, our lentils, our nuts, our seeds, our sweet potatoes, our vegetables, fruit, right? These are naturally occurring sugars, but the benefit of eating these complex carbohydrates, whole grains, is the fiber, right? So Brenda helpfully mentioned in the chat that fiber is our friend. It helps support that gut bacteria I was talking about before. It reduces our cholesterol naturally. It helps with our blood sugar control and that it releases energy into our blood sugar, into our bloodstream very slowly and consistently, meaning that our blood sugar levels aren't going to, peak and valley, what we want to avoid. So yes, that is complex carbohydrates. You want to look for the fiber. And as a good rule of thumb, fiber is a part of the plant. So if you're ever stuck getting our plants, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, those ones. Those are good examples. Question about xylitol. So if you see these on any products, the xylitol, the mannitol, these are sugar alcohols. You'll find these if you're familiar with those ice creams that are like, 400 calories for the whole pint. These sugar alcohols are also derived from plants. They raise our blood sugar significantly less than regular sugar, but they have a lot of GI distress side effects. Again, with the, bloating, discomfort, and they were written up recently about, their links to things like depression and stroke. So I would take that cautiously. If that's something that you find that you're eating every day, that's maybe something we'd want to find a little bit of a healthier alternative to. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. Brenda, what do you think?
I think we can answer maybe a few more. I think we just saw a question, what are the best oils to use?
Oh, wonderful question. So I would recommend 2 oils. I would recommend olive oil. And when it comes to olive oil, we want to make sure that we are looking for a dark container. Stay away from olive oil that is in a clear container because light is one of those things that affects our oil. It will make it go rancid quicker. We want to make sure that we look for cold pressed, right? The benefit of olive oil is in that extra virgin, that first press. So we want to look for that. And we don't want to store it near anywhere hot. So keep it away from your ovens, keep it away from the window. You don't have to refrigerate it, but we just don't want to keep it near anywhere hot. The other one is avocado oil. Same thing, you want to look for cold pressed. But if you're like deep frying something or you prefer a more neutral oil, avocado oil has much less of a taste and has a higher smoke point closer to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So those are the 2 oils that I would promote.
Well, I would like to say thank you, Tamar. She gave us so much information about so many interesting topics. I always say when it comes to food, we can talk all day because it's something that's so natural to all of us. And we have so many questions about all the information out there. So thank you, Tamar, for sharing your knowledge and hopefully answering some of the posing questions we've had for ourselves. I do want to share that this webinar has been taped, so you will all get a copy. So you'll be able to revisit a lot of the information shared today. I want to take this time to say sorry, I didn't realize the chat was enabled, but you kept us busy with the Q&A questions. So thank you for that information. I also want to provide a little bit of information on some upcoming topics that Workwell will be posting, or events, I should say. So please look out for our summer wellness block party. If you're ready to have some fun, please come and join us on June 7th at noon. We will be hosting our annual wellness fair at 1 Center Street in DCAS. If you're ready to move, dance, get wellness screenings, please come along. It is so much fun and it's a great way to be around your colleagues community is so important. Also, on June 21st, and at 6 p.m., we have our summer stretch. Join us in celebrating International Yoga Day. There'll be more details to come, but it's a beautiful way for us to start the summer season. Next slide, we have an additional upcoming event. On June 22nd at noon, we have a webinar, Identity and Intersectionality. Join us in taking a deep dive in identity and intersectionality in the context of the workplace. You will be engaged and have interactive activities during this webinar. So please, if you have the time, definitely register for this great event. And more information, we want you to follow us. We want you to be available to receive our webinars or our information as they come out. So don't miss any events, participate or register to join our mailing list. And we do have a QR code, so you should be able to register. If not, you can visit us on on.nyc.gov/mailing list. And lastly, keep in contact with us. You know, again, we are here to provide workplace workshops, webinars, resources. You can visit our website or you can email us at workwell@olr.nyc.gov or follow us on social media. We want to be available to you and we want to provide and continue to provide workshops like this today. So thank you all. Again, I will send an email with a copy of this webinar, a recording of this webinar, as well as attach a PDF of the slides. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.